Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Let's talk a little Jame Franklin, okay? So Jame Franklin, on Thursday's show, we talked a little bit about Jame Franklin, and we talked a little bit about him with the Arkansas job. And if you remember at the time, there was all sorts of weird just innuendo about Jame Franklin and whispers and rumors and, it could be done by this weekend. And I said, look, I do believe that Jame Franklin, what I said at the time, and I still stand by it, I think the powers that be at Arkansas want Jame Franklin. I think the money people who have final say, the money people have much more say than the actual AD does in this era. But I bring it up because I said, I think the money people are the people that are, the people that actually want Jame Franklin. I just don't know if Jame Franklin wants them. And I think conversely, I don't think if you're Jame Franklin, you have to be in a rush to make a decision. Well, I bring it up to very simply say this. Woke up Saturday. Now, admittedly, I live on the West Coast, so this was probably about 6:30, 6:45 Pacific time. I wake up to this very weirdly, vaguely worded Pete Thamel tweet about Jame Franklin. Matt, you could pop up the Pete Thamel tweet because I want to read it verbatim. He said, quote, sources, Jame Franklin and Virginia Tech are in the early stages of talks with some resolution on his candidacy expected in the upcoming days. Tech is still running a full search, but it's clear that there's mutual interest between the two parties. We reported it on game day. Matt, leave that up for a second. Listen, I don't get political. I haven't seen a word salad like that since the 2024 presidential election, though. What is that Kamala Harris word salad? I don't care. I said it. Jame Franklin and Virginia Tech are in the early stages of talks with some resolution on his candidacy and expected in the upcoming days. Tech is still running a full search, but it's clear there's mutual interest between the parties. So what I think I get out of this, first of all, the tweet makes no sense. Now, I think I understand the context why, but it says they're in the early stages, but there's mutual interest, but the candidacy is expected to be resolved in the upcoming days. Well, if they're in the early stages, why, these things take time. And then it says they're still running a full search, but they hope it's the biggest word salad I've ever seen. I thought Bruce Feldman did a little bit of cleaning up of that. He tweeted shortly thereafter or right around the same time, quote, as we reported at The Athletic on Friday, Jame Franklin is Virginia Tech's top target for its coaching candidacy. According to multiple sources, the Hokies are hoping a deal will get done with the former Penn State head coach by the end of the weekend. Thank you, Bruce Feldman, for cleaning up Pete Thamel's tweet. Let's talk Jame Franklin. Let's talk Virginia Tech, because I think that Bruce Feldman tweet really crystallizes some things. And I think, to me, it makes a lot of sense. Jame Franklin, again, I just thought the Bruce Feldman tweet was perfect. Jame Franklin is a clear candidate. They want Jame Franklin. They hope to get a resolution by the end of the weekend, okay? So that was the Bruce Feldman tweet. And then I do think from there, to me, it explains a lot of things, because I had a lot of people asking me, Torres, like, what does this all mean? Do you think Jame Franklin's going to be the Virginia Tech head coach? How soon do you think it's going to happen? Why are there conflicting reports? How soon is it going to get done? All that. I think, to me, it is very clear what is happening, and it is very clear who the leak came from. To me, it is abundantly clear that Virginia Tech leaked this story to every major outlet at the exact same time. Because in addition to Pete Thamel, in addition to Bruce Feldman, I also saw Pete Nakos from On3 basically put out a tweet at the exact same time. So you're talking about three of the biggest college sports insiders at three of the biggest outlets: Pete Thamel, ESPN, Pete Nakos, On3. Bruce Feldman works for the New York Times / Fox Sports. And what that tweet says to me is this. This is not coming from Jame Franklin's camp. This is a lot of what we talked about on Thursday's show. Jame Franklin's camp is trying to kick the can down the road as long as they can. And I bring it up because, to me, these leaks, all to the same, all basically the same verbiage to the same reporters, says this. Virginia Tech wants Jame Franklin. They believe that Jame Franklin wants them. but they don't want to sit around and wait another 2 weeks. They want answers. If he's not going to be the guy, they are ready to make the move and move on. And so this, to me, was to put public pressure on James Franklin to make a decision and choose to be the next Virginia Tech head coach. And so to me, the question becomes, is it actually going to happen? How soon is it going to happen? What is the likelihood it's going to happen? So let's discuss all of it. First of all, from the Virginia Tech side, I think it's a no-brainer. Listen, we've talked about it on this show really since the day James Franklin got fired. I think it had run its course at Penn State, but I don't think that means he's not a good coach. And I think you could actually say if Lane Kiffin is available or if Lane Kiffin is not available, in terms of dudes that you can hire, I would argue James Franklin realistically is probably the second best guy that's out there. If we believe Lane Kiffin is available, I would say Lane Kiffin is probably the best coach you can get. I'd take James Franklin over Eli Drinkwitz. I'd take James Franklin over whoever. Maybe if Marcus Freeman is available, it's a different conversation. But if James Franklin is available, he's really good. And that is the reason that Arkansas wanted him. That is the reason that Virginia Tech wants him. And if Virginia Tech can land him, it's an absolute home run, no doubt about it. And so the question is, can they land him? And to me, this goes back to a lot of what we talked about on last Thursday's show. If you listen to the segment, we talked a lot mostly from the Arkansas perspective. But the reason that I never bought that James Franklin was on the 1 yard line at Arkansas is the reason I don't believe he's on the 1 yard line at Virginia Tech. He holds all the leverage. Now, listen, maybe I'm dead wrong. Maybe by the time we get off air, James Franklin is the next head coach at Virginia Tech and we're doing an immediate reaction. That I don't know. But the counter to that is James Franklin holds all the leverage because where is Virginia Tech going to go from here? And conversely, James Franklin is a candidate at a lot of other places, including places that are either, frankly, A, better jobs than Virginia Tech, or B, maybe not even open yet, okay? So in terms of the timing of it all, there's no pressure on James Franklin. And I think this fake made-up deadline from Virginia Tech, I don't buy that part either. You know why? Because any Virginia Tech candidate that they would get that isn't named James Franklin is still coaching. So let's say they really like Bob Chesney. That's, for people who don't know, that's the James Madison guy. He's been at like 5 different spots. He's won everywhere. In the area, in Virginia, could come in and win right away, right? Bob Chesney still got 3 more weeks to coach. Let's say they want to pull from that pool of Alex Golish, Ryan Silverfield, whoever. Those guys are still coaching for another week or two. And so if James Franklin gives them a no or gives them a I'm going to wait, it's not like that they can just hire a guy tomorrow. So I don't understand this artificial fake deadline that they're trying to give him. Now, they're trying to press him to give him an answer because they want to lock up James Franklin. Now, conversely with James Franklin, I think he's in complete control here. And I said it with Arkansas the other day, is that to me, when I look at James Franklin, again, for all of the criticism, I would argue second best candidate available. And I would argue he is a candidate for quite literally all but 2 jobs on the market right now. 1, I think it's safe to say he's not going to be Penn State's next head coach. And then 2, I would also say that I think, in my opinion, he's not a candidate at wherever Lane Kiffin lands. So if Florida has a chance to get Lane Kiffin, James Franklin's not a candidate there. But what happens if Florida doesn't get Lane Kiffin? I think he becomes a candidate. What if Auburn really likes John Summerall, but John Summerall's coaching in the American Championship game and they go to the college football playoff? Maybe they don't want to wait. James Franklin becomes a candidate at Auburn. What I actually think, the job that I actually think he wants and covets is Florida State. Ironically, Florida State gets the win over Virginia Tech to improve to what, 6-5 or 5-5, this year. And I guess in some ways it helps Mike Norvell. I don't really know that it does, to be perfectly honest, because to me, I still think Mike Norvell's out at the end of the year. I don't think Mike Norvell's done enough. And listen, I don't think Mike Norvell's a bad dude, but I think the counter to that is, has he really done enough to prove that he should be your guy long-term? I really don't know the answer to that question. He had the great year in 2023 where everything aligned for him. The ACC wasn't very good. The COVID, year, it was kind of the early onset of NIL. They used a lot of their NIL money to retain players, and they were really the first one to really go all into the portal. Well, guess what? Now everybody's using the portal. I don't think they're going to be able to flip a roster and get 8, 10, 12, really good players out of the portal every year. And if you can't do that, I don't know that he has a blueprint to succeed at Florida State. He hasn't recruited the high school ranks well. He hasn't developed well other than guys that he brought in who were already developed somewhere else. And so I don't think Mike Norvell's the answer long term. And I actually think that's the job that James Franklin is waiting for. He's waiting to see, hey, if Mike Norvell goes 7-5, are they keeping him? If Mike Norvell goes 6-6, are they firing him? If Mike Norvell goes 7-5, are they still firing him after the season? And so, listen, like I said, I understand from Virginia Tech's perspective why they would be pushing James Franklin. I just don't know that James Franklin has to be in a rush. Now, listen, if he just wants to get to campus, start recruiting, start putting together a staff, albeit, but again, the counter to that is, can you get a better job? And it's not a knock on Virginia Tech, but I think even Virginia Tech fans would say, Florida State's a better job. Florida's a better job. Auburn's a better job. And so we'll see what happens. I will say this. If Virginia Tech lands James Franklin, I know those coaching, grading the coaching hires things always never work out well. All the hires that you think are going to be awesome never are. That's about as home run of a home run as Virginia Tech could get. You have a great coach who has won at a high level. I said this on my Fox Sports show the other night, is that basically if the argument against James Franklin is he doesn't beat the elite teams and the ceiling with him is 10-2, here's the good news. There are no elite teams in the ACC. Advantage James Franklin. And oh, by the way, if the problem for James Franklin becomes he can only be 10-2 at Virginia Tech, I think it's safe to say that fan base would take it. So you would get James Franklin. I think the other X factor too, you get a motivated James Franklin after being fired. This isn't Brian Kelly that's just looking to cash a big check on the way out. But the counter to that is you get James Franklin, I think it'd be really good in his recruiting territory. You don't think that guy would have a chip on his shoulder with the way things ended at Penn State? We'll see what happens from there.